If you're thinking about buying a container home in Australia, council approval is probably the first thing stopping you from pulling the trigger. Do you need it? How long does it take? And does it vary depending on where you live? The answer to all three is yes. And this video breaks it down state by state so you know exactly where you stand. First, the short answer. Container and modular homes are legal in every state in Australia. But in most cases, you do need some form of approval before you can live in one permanently. The good news is that the process has gotten significantly easier over the last few years, and in some states you can skip the full council process altogether if your build meets certain criteria. Let's go through the main states. In New South Wales, granny flats and secondary dwellings are permitted on residential land of at least 450 square metres. If your build meets the criteria under the Housing SEPP, you can use a complying development certificate instead of a full development application, which is faster and avoids going through council entirely. For manufactured and modular homes, you'll also need a Section 68 approval under the Local Government Act. The whole process typically takes 6 to 12 weeks. In Queensland, the rules vary between local councils, but occupancy restrictions on secondary dwellings were removed in 2022, meaning you can rent your container home to anyone, not just family members. For smaller, correctly sited builds, council approval is reportedly not required in around 90% of cases. If you do need approval, your local council's planning department is the starting point. Western Australia introduced the most significant reform of any state. From April 2024, if your modular home is 70 square metres or under and meets local setback requirements, you do not need planning approval at all. You still need a building permit, but the planning step, which is usually the slow part, is gone entirely for compliant builds. In South Australia, development approval is still required, but the rules around what you can build have been liberalised. Granny flats can now be fully self-contained and rented to anyone, and the maximum size has increased to 70 square metres. In Victoria, dwellings up to 60 square metres generally don't require a planning permit in most residential zones, but they do still require a building permit. Check your property's zoning overlays before proceeding, as these can add requirements depending on your specific location. Now, a few things that affect approval regardless of which state you're in. The type of product matters enormously. A purpose-built modular home engineered to Australian standards is much easier to get approved than a raw shipping container conversion. Councils know what to do with a manufactured building that comes with an engineer's compliance certificate. A modified shipping container without proper documentation creates delays and often rejections. Size matters too. In most states, smaller structures under 20 square metres with no plumbing or electrical connections often avoid the full approval process. Once you add a kitchen or bathroom, or go over 20 square metres, a development application or equivalent is typically required, and bushfire zones add a layer. If your land has a BAL rating, bushfire attack level, your structure needs to meet that rating. Make sure whatever product you're buying can be specified to your land's BAL requirement before you commit. The practical advice is this. Before you buy, call your local council and ask specifically about modular or manufactured dwellings. Some planning departments are more familiar with the process than others. Having your supplier's documentation ready, the engineer's compliance certificate, floor plans and structural specs makes the process significantly smoother. The bottom line, you almost certainly need some form of approval, but in most states the process is now faster and more straightforward than it's ever been. Western Australia and New South Wales in particular have made it genuinely accessible for homeowners who want to add a modular dwelling to their property. The link in the description takes you to our full range, and we can point you toward the right documentation for your state. Thanks for watching.